We continue analyzing the Ravens' Week 17 loss to the Los Angeles Rams next year on Locked On Ravens.
You are Locked On Ravens, your daily Baltimore Ravens podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And we return here with another episode of Locked On Ravens. I'm your host, Kevin Ostreicher of Ravens Wire, and since it is another Taco Tuesday, back with us as our regular Taco Tuesday guest, the one, the only, Spencer Schultz of Baltimore Beatdown. And Spencer, we're in a situation here where we are now talking about a 500 football team. The Ravens fall to 8-8 after a heartbreaking 20-19 loss to the Rams, and utterly, again, heartbreaking, shocking fashion. How you doing today?
I've been better. It's disappointing to have the holidays kind of spurned by the Ravens whenever they really have something on the line. It feels like they have not been able to get it done. Last year in 2020, they were able to go on a nice run and beat some low-hanging fruit, poor teams towards the end of the year there, aside from a pretty good Browns team, and sneak in. And this year, the magic finally ran out. So it feels like there's a lot of people who were expecting something magical to happen with so many players out, with Lamar Jackson out, and then felt very disappointed when something magical didn't happen, and Ravens were not able to beat the Rams. They weren't able to beat the Packers, losing some close games all along, and have ended up, 4-4 in those one-score games ultimately as the scale tipped back against their favor with so many players out. And it was kind of a microcosm of the Ravens season to watch how that game played out and to watch them struggle and be unable to get a stop or punch in a touchdown or make the one play necessary to win. And they, did an admirable job. It feels like this team has done a great job preparing during the week with whoever they do have in the facility, whether it's new faces or guys coming back from injury or coming back from COVID, and getting them ready, having nice game plans to kind of limit some of these good teams overall offensively and play in these kind of knockdown, drag out games. And they weren't able to get it done here. So I know that a lot of fans are very disappointed, but at the end of the day, they've kind of been fighting with a hand tied behind their back, so to speak, a la Jamie Lannister for quite some time, and they weren't able to get it done here. So they've got a miracle to make the playoffs, which, hey, it's happened before, but would take a pretty crazy string of events. So hope is not all completely lost, but for the most part it is, and it's going to be time most likely for the Ravens to collect themselves, lick their wounds, reestablish, get back some guys from some major injuries, and see what they can do. They have a really nice nucleus. They've accomplished some nice things. They've been able to hang in there tough and feel good about where they are as a program, as a franchise, as a organization, and all of those things. But right now it's tough.
Yeah, it is. The Ravens have lost 4 of their last 5 on this 5-game losing streak by a combined 5 points. They've been right there. They have fought to the end, but it just hasn't been enough over these last 5 weeks. And Spencer, they've had to do most of this without their starting quarterback in Lamar Jackson. And last week, week 17 against the Rams, it was Tyler Huntley who got the nod. And Huntley, I thought played okay. He went 20-32, 197 yards, 1 interception. Spencer, what was your overall assessment of this performance by Huntley based off of what you have been expecting out of him, based off what you've seen from him during his performances? Was this up there with the best? Was it down there with the worst, or maybe even right in the middle for you?
Yeah, it was a so-so performance, considering he's an undrafted guy that missed time again. He was sick. He goes on the list. That's why Josh Johnson had to play. So he missed quite a few practices himself. It's kind of hard. Imagine what happens when you get sick. You might lose some weight. You might feel sluggish. You might need some rest. It might, sometimes it takes people 2-3 weeks to catch up from when they're down and out with a little bit of sickness. And Huntley, managed himself well. He sustained some drives, but wasn't able to make any really special throws. And, I think he's done a lot of really nice things. He's can be decisive. He's very athletic. He's pretty turnover averse overall, aside from that throw, which he said was a miscommunication, and John Harbaugh said was not a miscommunication, and then he was supposed to hit Mark Andrews on that play and something of the sort. But he played a nice game. He led some drives, but delay games. You can blame the coach, but you can blame the quarterback either way, because you got to get to the line, you got to snap the ball, you got to have urgency there, and that's any level of football, regardless of how much time you've missed or anything of the sort. You can't keep taking delay games. You hear Harbaugh kind of say, he was at the line ready, so why would I call a timeout when he's under center? So often Lamar Jackson gets the ball off in those situations. Very, very, very often when they are at the line, you got to snap it. It's not like there was motion or anything to be had. It was just a little indecision there and cost of the Ravens. But I mean, Huntley's I would say he's a very conservative quarterback that's athletic. This year, among all quarterbacks with all qualified quarterbacks with 150 or more dropbacks, according to PFF, he's made 2 big time throws. And PFF, with their grading and things, is very arbitrary and kind of has some subjectivity to it. But big time throws usually are a pretty strong indicator of when there was a special throw made. And I think that we just haven't really seen that out of Huntley. Not a lot of balls where he's dropping it in a bucket, putting it where only his guy can get it, things of that nature. There's some where, he hits Mark Andrews a little bit, away, and Mark Andrews goes up and gets the ball, but it seems like it's a little bit more of being conservative and forcing him to make a big catch, when he didn't really need to at times. So I think that he's got himself with a lot more of a compact release since Utah. He used to have a very slow, laborious, looping release, and he's tightened that up a lot, but we just don't see him making a lot of very special throws. We also don't really see him playing poorly consistently. So I think he's been a very good backup. I think he is a very good backup. Some people want to see him get a chance to start or something of that nature. If you want to go build your team around him, that's fine with me. It's probably not going to be what I want to do, especially in lieu of Lamar Jackson there. But at this point, 1.2, 1 out of every 100 throws he makes are special. So I don't think there's any super special factor there. But I think that there is a good factor there. I think there's solid. I think there's some consistency. I think there's athleticism. Some of the same things Lamar Jackson struggled with, taking sacks out of a clean pocket, not getting the ball away, not throwing it away over someone's head, things of that nature. He's very inexperienced. He's only had a few starts, but some of those same things we did see. And he decisive underneath. He throws a tight spiral and can hit some slants and some curls and some hitches. And then that's when you see defenses start to tighten up and walk up a little bit. And he can throw the ball to level 2 a little bit, but ultimately, I think he still has a lot of work to do, especially over top. He has not completed a pass that has traveled over 30 yards in the air downfield this year. So he really lacks that deep ball confidence. And I think we saw that on whatever happened with the Hollywood Brown situation before the end of half. And, from there, the Ravens started to kind of pee down their leg a little bit at the end of the first half and let the Rams back into that game. They weren't out of it, but they gave the Rams some confidence, made it a close game, put more pressure on themselves, and weren't able to get things done. So I think it was an okay performance from Huntley, but to go down into the opposition side of the field so many times and not be able to, go put one up for one of your guys there or find Rashad Bateman over top or give somebody a chance there. I mean, he got pressure in his face, missed Devin Duvernay, who had an opening in the end zone at one point. There's just a lot of times they couldn't get it done. So considering, they're up against the Rams, Von Miller, Aaron Donald, Leonard Floyd, Jalen Ramsey, a loaded defense, some other really nice key contributors there. Their offensive line their defensive line is very strong, all those things. They thought he played admirably, but, wasn't good enough.
Yeah, and the Ravens going 0 for 2 in the red zone. No touchdown scored by this offense. The only touchdown came by the defense we'll be talking about in the second segment. But Spencer, the wide receiver position for the Ravens over the course of their franchise history, widely regarded as, I think, a weakness. And this year, they have one of the deepest positional groups in their franchise history at wide receiver. Guys like Marquise Brown, Rashad Bateman, and Sammy Watkins, Devin Duvernay, etc. Well, the Ravens only had 5 receivers active for this game in Week 17. One of the inactive ones was James Prochet. And this was after Prochet was coming off of a really nice game against Cincinnati, 7 catches. And also, to be fair, Miles Boykin also inactive. So 5 out of the 7 receivers were inactive. Now, the Prochet inactive caused a lot of uproar within the Ravens community because of the performance that he had and the player that he is. And I think people just wanting him to continue to get opportunities. Do you think that James Prochet should have been active in this game, Spencer? And do you think the Ravens could have even afforded to have more than 5 receivers active?
This is why I hate box score scouting, looking at box scores and saying, James Prochet had 7 receptions for 76 yards. 6 of those targets came in a 20-point game with less than 6 minutes to go over the Ravens' final 2 drives. One of them, actually, it was 8 targets. I guess ESPN didn't chart it that way, but Josh Johnson threw a pick when he was targeting James Prochet, and that's not necessarily Prochet's fault or anything, but I don't really know what is so special about 7 catches for 76 yards at the end of a game in a blowout, down with a backup quarterback in. Bengals are kind of playing off a little bit. I think there's a lot of players in the NFL that can do that. I think there's a lot of players in the Ravens that can do that if you put the ball in their direction. Am I speaking poorly of James Prochet? No. I think he has the best maybe concentration on the team in terms of being able to haul the ball in and not lose focus. I think he has really great hands, maybe the best hands on the team. He's tough. He's a competitor. He's a nice special teams player. He can do a lot of good things. A good slot receiver. I think there is a place for him to be a guy who runs 400 routes, 300 routes out of the slot. But out of the slot. So in terms of looking at what the Ravens have and don't have, when you go look at the usage for the Ravens wide receivers this year, James Prochet leads the Ravens by actually over 20%, 24.1% in terms of how frequently he plays out of the slot versus out wide. So he's run 152 routes out of the slot. He has run 22 out wide, 86%, a little over 86% of his snaps are in the slot. So what is James Prochet in the Ravens offense? It's a slot receiver. What is Sammy Watkins, who a lot of people seem to be upset about him playing? Basically the exact inverse. 86.4% of Prochet's snaps are in the slot. 86.7 are Sammy Watkins snaps out wide. He plays almost exclusively out wide. James Prochet plays almost exclusively in the slot. So then we ask, who else do the Ravens have in the slot? Mark Andrews, the second most yards receiving in the NFL this year out of the slot. Plays 62% of the time out of the slot. Devin Duvernay has 300 yards this year, made some plays out of the slot. 237 snaps out of the slot. Marquise Brown plays out of the slot a good bit, 197 snaps there. Rashad Bateman has run 65 snaps out of the slot. They're comfortable putting him there. Tylan Wallace, who ends up getting the nod over Prochet in this game, actually has the 4th highest rate of slot snaps with 58.9% of his. So all these slot receivers, guys who are comfortable playing the slot, the Ravens are comfortable playing in the slot. Then who are they comfortable playing out wide? It's really mainly Watkins, Bateman, and Marquise Brown. Those are the only Ravens who play over 50% of their snaps out wide. So let's ask the question now then, if you activate James Prochet instead of Tylan Wallace, who has been an outstanding special teams player, split a double team. He also pinned the Rams at the 4-yard line after the Ravens opening possession, had a couple nice special teams plays. He's had, I think, 4 multi-tackle special teams games this year, made some really awesome plays on special teams. Prochet can do some things as well, but Wallace has really become a core special teams player for the Ravens and is going to be relied on there next year very heavily. But so let's say, you activate Prochet over Watkins, which is what fans want. Then let's say Rashad Bateman or Marquise Brown pulls a hammy and can't go in a must-win game. You have maybe, one receiver between Bateman and Brown who's spent most of their time out wide this year. I think that's going to handicap what you're comfortable running in terms of personnel, in terms of route concepts, in terms of trips or alignments or things of that nature. So I don't really understand looking at Watkins and saying, why did they activate Watkins over Prochet? That's like saying, why did they activate an outside linebacker instead of an inside linebacker? It's, they're both linebackers, but they kind of play different positions there. So if you want to look to who they picked, it was Tylan Wallace, and it was because of special teams. So Prochet, like I said, has great concentration, great hands, made some nice plays out of the slot in the end of a blowout. I think he had 2 catches for 25 yards in the first half of that game, but Prochet definitely is going to be in their plans moving forward. But right now there's just a log jam of bodies in the slot, and Devin Duvernay is their starting returner, a guy who's made plays offensively this year, and fans desperately want. He's that move H, kind of like Willie Snead played, take the jet sweeps, throw some screens to him, all that good stuff. Has the long speed, is a 4.3 guy that can hit 21 miles per hour on a kick return. So Prochet is not that. He's not a big body that can play on the outside. And, Sammy Watkins played mainly role in the run game in this game. 9 of his, I think 16 snaps were in the run department. And if you go watch that 32-yard run by Devontae Freeman, guess who leveraged Jalen Ramsey and opened up a little bit of a hole using his body to wedge for Freeman to make that run? It was Sammy Watkins. So it's kind of like, saying, why did they activate, Jalen Ferguson over, Christian Welch? It's like, well, they, wanted someone for special teams. They wanted more bodies in that department. We've seen them activate 6 receivers at times, but they probably needed more DBs in this one, and they wanted Wallace to play special teams. So I think Prochet has a place in this league, a place on this team, and he's going to continue to get more snaps next year. Sammy Watkins will probably be gone. Maybe you're more comfortable getting Tylan Wallace more outside reps, which he ran almost exclusively in college, and kind of getting him there and getting Prochet a little bit more snaps out wide throughout camp and throughout the offseason so that you feel more comfortable there. And it is what it is. But to just go look and say, oh, he had 7 catches for 76 yards. Why is he not active? I think is very shallow and lacks context, lacks really any insight into the way that football is played or the way that, things work in the NFL. If you have to have that explained, I don't really get it. That one, I don't understand. Sammy Watkins plays on the outside. Prochet plays on the inside. Tylan Wallace has been a great gunner, so they picked him over Prochet. I don't know what the big hoopla is, but I think it just starts with looking at box scores, and I would highly recommend not using that as a sole factor because it lacks context, it lacks nuance, and kind of has no insight.
Well, this is why I was so shocked that the Ravens took 2 receivers in 2021. Not to say that Tylan Wallace wasn't the right pick. I thought where they got him was a steal. But the Ravens took 2 receivers in 2019. They took 2 receivers in 2020. And they took 2 receivers in 2021. This is the exact situation I expected out of this. Also signing Sammy Watkins. James Prochet deserves opportunities. But where are they coming from? That's the key question. Right now, there just aren't many, if any, to give him. And the Ravens, you talked about it, Spencer, they have activated 6 receivers before. They can certainly do that. But with how many injuries they've had this year, with where they need bodies right now, healthy bodies, with, a fullback reliant offense, right? They're not going to activate James Prochet over Patrick Ricard or James Prochet over an extra offensive lineman or defensive back because they have talent at the wide receiver position. Prochet is a part of that. But they have enough talent to me where I'm confident with Marquise Brown and Rashad Bateman and Sammy Watkins and whoever else, as opposed to having Prochet active and not having that extra defensive back or that extra offensive lineman that can truly help and that the Ravens truly need at this point in the year. So I agree, Spencer. I think Prochet is absolutely a part of the Ravens' plans. He should be. He's a talented receiver. But right now, there just aren't enough opportunities to give everybody. And unfortunately for Prochet, that means he's the odd man out. But we'll head into our first break. We'll make it back. We'll be diving into the Ravens defense in week 17 against the Rams. So stay tuned for that. And we will be right back. Hey, Ravens fans, this is Kevin Oestreicher with an incredible app everyone who buys gas needs to know about in Get Upside. Just download the free Get Upside app in the App Store or Google Play right now and use promo code TOUCHDOWN and get a bonus 25 cents per gallon on your first fill-up. That's up to 50 cents a gallon cash back. Don't pay full price at the pump anymore. Get cash back using Get Upside. Just download the free Get Upside app and use promo code TOUCHDOWN to get up to 50 cents a gallon cash back on your first tank. Some people who drive a lot are saving as much as $200 to $300 a month in cash back, and there's no catch. The cash back gets added right to your account. You can cash out anytime to your bank account, PayPal, or any gift card for Amazon and other brands. Just download the free Get Upside app and use promo code TOUCHDOWN to get up 50 cents a gallon cash back on your first tank. That's code TOUCHDOWN. We return here. It's our second segment of this Taco Tuesday edition of Locked On Ravens. Kevin Oestreicher, your host, still here with Spencer Schultz of Baltimore Beatdown. And Spencer, this Ravens defense, I thought played pretty well overall, holding Matthew Stafford and Cooper Kupp to 20 points. They only had Kupp go for 6 for 95 and a score, which, with some people thought 200 could have been a possibility for Kupp against this Ravens secondary that is truly missing a ton of bodies right now. But Spencer, what are your overall thoughts on how this Baltimore defense performed? I mean, overall, I thought it was solid, but the last drive was really the one where they needed to stop and they just couldn't get it.
Yeah, I thought this Ravens defense played really well. Chuck Clark, aside from the 2 interceptions, actually played a lot of man coverage against Cooper Kupp, was trailing him a lot and kind of being assigned to his side of the field. I thought he did a good job there. The Ravens really committed to the run. They did not care about bootlegs. They did not care when Matt Stafford rolled out and kind of found Tyler Higbee and found some other underneath options quite a few times. They really did not want to let the Rams beat them in the run game, which is usually most coaches, and especially Wink Martindale, the easiest way to lose a game is to get ran on. When you can't stop the run, then you can't stop the pass, and it opens things up. And we've seen teams like the Vikings and the Browns be able to build that way specifically with a similar type offense. But Matt Stafford made a couple bad throws. The kind of punt interception to Odell Beckham that Chuck Clark reeled in for his second one was really a poorly placed ball. Horrible throw. Chuck Clark goes up and gets it. Effectively was a punt. Would have been nice if he could have picked that up and ran with it a little bit, but I think the Ravens ended up scoring a field goal anyway on that drive. So it was kind of a null point, but ultimately, the Ravens forced Matt Stafford to try and pick them apart at level 2, throw a little bit more intermediate They played a little bit conservatively on the back end. They were able to get pressure on him here and there. He was very slippery, actually, in this game. Saw him able to make Justin Houston miss. Tyus Bowser ends up forcing a fumble with a strip sack, but Matt Stafford torpedoed underneath of him and flipped him up over his head, and was kind of a bucking bronco in this game. So it was kind of fun to watch. And the Rams, get the short field after that Tyler Huntley kind of aberrant interception at the end of the first half, and lets them back in the game, get a little confidence. I thought one of the big blunders of the game was maybe not calling a timeout or not, making some sort of adjustment so that it's not Patrick Queen lined up in the slot in too high against Cooper Kupp. I think that they kind of gave Kupp a lot of casual treatment. He didn't really make them pay too much, but to the point where at one point he's wide open in the flat and runs for 25 yards after the catch and sets up a touchdown late in the game. So they're maybe a little bit too casual with Cooper Kupp at some points. But what I learned from this game is that the Ravens, and from last week, is that the Ravens really do think Devontae Adams is the best receiver in the NFL. Maybe it has to do a little bit more with not wanting to sleep on maybe the T. Higgins and the Odell Beckhams and the Van Jeffersons and the Tyler Boyds a little bit, but they have not treated Jamar Chase or Cooper Kupp anything like they treated Devontae Adams. So like you said, Kevin, Kupp had a nice game, and but at the same time, he didn't, explode and go for this huge game. I'm sure tons of people took him in DFS and tons of things. I have him in a fantasy championship, and I didn't want him to beat down on the Ravens, but if he did, it would have been a nice consolation. So they hold him under 100 yards, I think, for the first time in like 5 games. Any team did that. So they forced the Rams to be very methodical. They did a good job against the run for the most part. They made a couple tackle for losses, some big plays at some timely moments, and held them scoreless pretty much throughout the entire first half, all the way down till that interception, which I think really was kind of the beginning of the end. You could feel the tilt of the Ravens feeling very confident, and tempo was very, in control, and decisions were very easy. And then that happens and things get a little bit erratic. The Ravens are able to convert a field goal at the end of the first half to make it 13-7 at least ultimately. But then, the Rams kind of get the ball in the fourth quarter. I think Matt Stafford in the second half, I don't think Stafford missed a throw in the fourth quarter, if I'm not mistaken. I don't think there were any incompletions. So he really started being able to pick them apart at level 2 and running some zone beaters. They used a ton of trips. So the Ravens did very admirably. I would say, obviously, the play of the game came down to 4th and 5 after a huge tackle for loss by Jimmy Smith. And Tavon Young gets lined up over Odell Beckham, and Odell sits at the stick. And I think, Tavon Young didn't react with enough urgency to the situation. Odell sat down, put his hands up, and Stafford kind of saw it, took a shuffle step, and then threw it, and allowed Odell to really get a free first down there a little bit, when I thought Tavon was actually in a good place to kind of come from behind and hit the catch point and be able to break that up. And he just kind of, I guess, was a little tentative that Odell might, start to move, or that, he's going to get there a little bit early or something. So to me, that came down to the play of the game. Haven't had a chance to watch the coach's film yet, but I want to go look at that one and see what happened again, because it seemed like I thought Tavon had a good shot. We saw Tony Jefferson play really outstanding in this game. We saw Brandon Stevens, who really has come into form in the last month or two after the Deshaun Elliott injury. He had some ups and downs, which so did Deshaun Elliott last year in his first year as a starter. And I think we're seeing Stevens really start to be able to fit in the run game extremely well. He's starting to recognize an ID who is going to be, running the deep post or running the deep cross and breaking across the field. And he's a really great athlete who can turn and run, a 4-star running back, turn into a DB. So he's got the physicality. He seems like a really consistent tackler in the open field, and a player that I think people are not quite excited enough about for what he's shown this year. And there's a lot of questions at safety. Deshaun Elliott's a free agent, and a lot of people are looking for a safety. Stevens, I don't know that he'll ever be a premier ball hawk in the NFL, but someone who can kind of learn with Chuck Clark and be part of that rotation. He can go cover in the slot really well, has strong man coverage skills. He can play in the box. He can play some corner for you, move around. He can play deep third. He can play deep half. So to go get another safety or to keep Deshaun Elliott, I think they're going to have a really nice safety room with him continuing to grow and develop. A guy who's still a neophyte at the position, playing as well as he is really, I think, in the entire NFL, one of the more crazy stories that hasn't really gotten much attention, considering his inexperience in that position and how much the Ravens have leaned on him. And they've had some nice defensive performances aside from that Bengals game since he took over for Deshaun Elliott, and he's been a big part. So I liked what I saw out of him very much so. There was a really interesting game going on up front between Brandon Williams and the Rams center, Brian Allen, who is a very finesse center. Williams has no finesse. He is all stack and shed and leverage and strength. So there was times where Brian Allen was using some bluff blocks where he was kind of, showing hands and then just getting out of the way of Williams and making him fall on his face. There was times where Williams was exploding past him and making tackles for loss. So that was a really fun chess game that we saw. Tyus Bowser and Justin Houston able to apply a little bit of pressure. The pressure wasn't very consistent in this one. Calais Campbell had a couple nice pressures. He did absolutely obliterate the Rams right tackle, Rob Havenstein, on a hump move at one point. So there's a lot of big boy ball going on. There were some missed tackles. There were some good tackles. There was interceptions. There's, some, I think Chuck Clark ended up with 2 picks and a pass defended. So he had a great game. And ultimately, Jimmy Smith didn't really get beat a ton in this one. We didn't really see these corners get beaten up on too much, but the Rams were eventually able to kind of settle down, get methodical, and pick the Ravens apart a little bit, and able to go score when they needed to, able to drive down and, convert 2 touchdowns in the second half and do so to the point where they won the football game. We see them have a chance to really put the game away almost on a 2-point conversion. They get super creative, and Tony Jefferson stuck with it, comes flying in and wrestles down the 2-point conversion on a little sit and ladder play. And it was a nice design. It was a screen. It was very fancy. I think it was the thing that Ravens fans really want to see out of Greg Roman, and it ultimately doesn't work anyway. It wasn't a sprint out. It was the most creative play possible and ultimately still failed. So I think that if that play had succeeded, then it would have somehow been Greg Roman's fault. But ultimately, it was a great play by Tony Jefferson, one of the best plays of the year. And unfortunately, the Ravens offense with an inexperienced quarterback going in the 2-minute against Aaron Donald and Von Miller and Leonard Floyd and Greg Gaines aren't able to, go drive down the field with 59 seconds and a timeout. So it was a difficult end, microcosm of this season of, having those couple plays to make and not being able to make a single one of them at any given point. Instead, allowing a 4th and 5 conversion. I think that the Ravens maybe could have called a timeout or not called any timeouts in that situation. Or they could have, allowed the Rams to score, kind of played it soft, give yourselves a little bit more time to go down and kick a field goal or score a touchdown. I think that the urgency there was a little bit too much for Huntley and the offensive line to handle against that all-star pass rush. So it was a difficult situation, a difficult loss. There were some difficult moments on both sides of the ball, but defensively, I thought they really limited the Rams. Sony Michel, I think, ran for over 400 yards in the month of December. Had a really strong month, and the Ravens pretty much kept him in check for most of the game. He was able to snake a couple, decent runs there, but did a good job playing the zone and making Matt Stafford have to pick them apart, preventing some big plays from happening. At the end of the game, they fall apart a little bit, but it's a ragtag group. I'm sure, if you have Marcus Peters, Marlon Humphrey back there, you're probably able to close some things out a little bit more effectively, but it is what it is. And I think this game, again, both sides of the ball, offensively and defensively, was just a true summation of what we've seen this season. A team that had a ton of fight, a ton of, well-prepared games where it felt like they did a great job preparing and taking away what teams did best and not allowing teams to take advantage of them consistently and, playing some incomplete football and ultimately just not having maybe the horses to go make those finishing plays to stick the dagger in your opponent. So it was on both sides of the ball, I think, a true microcosm of what this entire Ravens season was, and it was very painful to watch at the end of the game there, but it gives a lot of hope for some of these younger players like the Brandon Stevens and some of these depth guys that have made a name for themselves. Patrick McCary, Von Miller finally beats him in their second matchup of the year, and Von Miller goes out and says how he's one of the best right tackles in football after the Ravens sign him for $5 million a year. So there's a lot of good to take away from this season. There's a lot of bad to take away from this season, but most importantly, hopefully these Ravens can have some relative modicum of health on the defensive side of the football and the offensive side of the football. And it was just a little bit too much for them to overcome this year. And it was a real painful, entertaining roller coaster, but it's almost over now. And they've got one more game to send Ben Roethlisberger home empty-handed and win one at M&T Bank Stadium and send the old man riding off into the sunset with his tail tucked between his legs. So I'm sure Wink Martindale is going to have this defense ready to play with the passion of 1,000 suns to emphasize the rivalry and give one more great effort before this season comes to a close. So it's going to be fun to see that one. And when that game's being played, most likely the Ravens will still have a chance at the playoffs. So they do need to win that game and hope that things fall in line.
Yeah, there's no way with the way this season has gone and the way that John Harbaugh has emphasized it time and time again. This Ravens team has not given up, and especially with the game still being at 1 o'clock, they will still have playoff implications. The chances might not be huge, only about 2%, 3%, but crazier things have happened as you talked about at the beginning of the show, Spencer. So yeah, this week 18 game is going to be a big one. We'll talk about it in a little bit by taking a trip down memory lane in our final segment. So stay tuned for that, and we will be right back. BetOnline is who cover this holiday season with more props, odds, and lines than ever before. As football continues its march through the college bowls and the pro football playoffs, BetOnline remains your number one spot for all the sports action this season. Head to the website or use your mobile device to sign up today and receive your 50% welcome bonus on your first deposit. Just use our promo code LOCKEDON to receive your bonus. From basketball, football, NHL, boxing, and UFC, right to your favorite Vegas casino games. Don't wait to take advantage of all the amazing offers available for the 2021 season. BetOnline is the fastest and easiest way to bet on all your favorite sports. So don't wait to take advantage of all the new amazing offers available. BetOnline, where the game starts. We return here our final segment, this Taco Tuesday edition of Locked On Ravens. Kevin Oestreicher here, still with Spencer Schultz. And Spencer, the Ravens are going to be taking on this Pittsburgh Steelers team in Week 18 with one Ben Roethlisberger behind center for the Pittsburgh Steelers, somebody who has been a key staple in the Ravens and Steelers rivalry dating back, as long as a lot of people can even remember with this team. Now, hasn't been there the whole time, but regardless, a lot of memories with Ben Roethlisberger, and with this potentially, of course, it has not been made official, but potentially seems like the writing's on the wall being his last NFL game. I'd personally be shocked if Roethlisberger plays beyond this one, is just how many memories there have been with Roethlisberger at M&T Bank Stadium in this Ravens rivalry. Spencer, what are some of your favorite Ben Roethlisberger moments, whether they were joyous moments for the Ravens or moments that were not as fun for the Ravens over the course of Roethlisberger's very long NFL career?
Yeah, it certainly has been a whirlwind. Ben Roethlisberger got his first taste of NFL, live action football in M&T Bank Stadium. The Ravens win that one after knocking Tommy Maddox out of the game, and then the Steelers end up winning 15 straight in Ben Roethlisberger's rookie season to go on and win the AFC there, or take the 1 seed. So it was a certainly insane rivalry to begin. Ben Roethlisberger used to be this hulking mammoth that was mobile, that would stiff arm defensive linemen down and hit him, and they would just fall off of him. And linebackers weren't a true, challenge for Ben Roethlisberger sometimes. My favorite moments are definitely Bart Scott's hit of Ben Roethlisberger in a 35-7 blowout, where the Ravens absolutely slobber knocked the Steelers. The Ravens also defeating the Steelers 22-20 on Thanksgiving in 2013 by stuffing a 2-point conversion and forcing a split. That was the infamous moment or infamous game where Mike Tomlin kind of inadvertently steps onto the field, ends up getting fined for it, $100,000 for what he did. That was kind of a peak of the Joe Flacco, Ben Roethlisberger era. The Ravens beat the Steelers 26-6 at M&T Bank Stadium. It was the first time in 3 seasons the Steelers hadn't scored a touchdown. There was 2 games decided by 20 points that season. The Steelers beat the Ravens 43-23 at Heinz Field that same year, and the Steelers win the AFC North that season. The Ravens then go on to the wild card and actually end up beating the Steelers January 3rd, 2015, 30-17 in a wild card game there, and then go on to play the Patriots in another shootout. The Ravens and Steelers have just been going at it for so long. Terrell Suggs sacking Ben Roethlisberger more than any player in his career. One of the greatest quotes in Baltimore Ravens history: "His soul belongs to God, but his ass belongs to me." Terrell Suggs talking about Ben Roethlisberger and that relationship. Terrell Suggs picking off screen passes and catching balls between his legs. And one of my favorite moments actually in that whole rivalry, in the whole Roethlisberger era, was Tony Jefferson robbing Vance McDonald of a ball and what I still consider a defensive touchdown, even though Tony Jefferson was ruled down because they touched cleats on the ground or something like that. But that was a really cool moment as well. Anthony Levine ends up taking that one with an interception late in the game, one of the biggest plays of CoCap's career. And it's just crazy that, 2008 to 2018, a decade of Joe Flacco versus Ben Roethlisberger. Joe loses in the AFC Championship game. There's a pick six to Troy Polamalu in that game. The Steelers are a real monkey on Joe's back for quite some time, and he's finally able to get the best of them a couple times. Ravens go on to win a Super Bowl and do some really awesome things. Torrey Smith catching a ball, 26-yard touchdown at the end of a game where I was at that moment. I was pledging a fraternity, and we had a pledge event, and some of the brothers knew I was a big Ravens fan, so they go and say, "Oh, the Ravens lost," and are all upset. And then I come out of that to discover that the Ravens had actually won that game on a 26-yard touchdown. So I didn't get to see that one live, but that was one of the few ones I've missed, the end of that game. But a ton of memories there. Roethlisberger throwing for 506 yards in a 2017 game. Santonio Holmes having some game-winning touchdowns. Antonio Brown ruining holidays for the Ravens. Alex Collins doing some pretty crazy stuff in 2018. All kinds of stuff, man. All kinds of stuff. It's been so long. So much has gone on. And Ben Roethlisberger and Joe Flacco went at it for such a long time. It's a shame that we won't get to have Lamar Jackson and Ben Roethlisberger square off in this one and have a little bit of the AFC North passing of the torch. I don't expect Lamar Jackson to play in this one. Maybe I'm wrong there, but it's been a lot of fun. And these two teams have just given each other trouble consistently. Big Ben has beaten the Ravens late. The Ravens have beaten Big Ben late. Ryan Clark and Willis McGahee, huge hit back in the day there. The Steelers going to win the Super Bowl over the Arizona Cardinals that year. All kinds of crazy stuff has gone on. So it's been an incredible rivalry. I will not miss Ben Roethlisberger. I think him and Joe Flacco both still being in the league is pretty crazy in the year 2018. Flacco kind of floating around with the Jets there a little bit, but Big Ben being on the Steelers this entire time is crazy. And it's been a ton of fun to watch these teams go at it over the years. And, the Ravens in their worst year under John Harbaugh, 2015, 5-11, able to go deal the Steelers a loss when they had the terrible Bs, the triple Bs, the killer Bs. So all kinds of fun stuff. I'll always remember Terrell Suggs and Ben Roethlisberger and kind of Terrell Suggs' hatred for him and some of these huge moments. Haloti Ngata breaks his nose, and then Ben Roethlisberger ends up staying in the game with a crooked nose and beating the Ravens in M&T Bank Stadium. So it's definitely been one of the most storied rivalries. I think it was ranked number 2 in all of American sports last year, or the year before. 2015 Bleacher Report had it as the number 1 rivalry in the NFL, and it's been that for quite some time. So I think that Hines Ward summated it the best by saying the coaches hate each other, the players hate each other. There's no calling each other out after the game and inviting each other out to dinner, but the feeling's mutual. They don't like us and we don't like them. There's no need to hide it. They know it. We know it. It's going to be one of those black and blue games. So I think Ben Roethlisberger's at the forefront of that, along with Suggs, Lewis, Reed, Jamal Lewis, Ray Rice, Anquan Bolt, and all these guys. Torrey Smith made so many plays against the Steelers. So Santonio Holmes, Antonio Brown, Le'Veon Bell, Thanksgiving, Christmas, going on forever. And all these primetime games, all these night games, all these late season games, these playoff games, these defining matchups in the history of these two franchises. And a chapter of that will be ending in Baltimore on Sunday. And the Ravens being able to send Ben Roethlisberger out in his final game with a loss would be nothing short of a great way to close that chapter for Ravens fans, as I'm sure Ben Roethlisberger and the Steelers will be giving everything as well. And again, at 1:00 when that game's being played, in all likelihood, both of those teams will still have a shot at the playoffs. So their season will not end with the end of that game. So whoever wins will be alive until the end of another game, most likely. So it's going to be a lot of fun, and I'm really excited for it. I hope that fans fill up Raven Stadium and are able to make a ton of noise and send Ben Roethlisberger out with a big fat L.
Yeah, I mean, it's crazy to think that this is most likely the final page of this chapter, that, the rivalry is not going anywhere. But these players, the passing of the torch, you're exactly right. And I just remember, it seemed like every single game Ben Roethlisberger played against the Ravens, especially in the prime of his career, it would be what you were talking about, where he would just bounce off of guys and the Ravens would have him dead to rights, and he would find a way to escape and find Hines Ward or find Santonio Holmes or find whoever on a big, like a big third down or something, where you have Terrell Suggs right there and he just shakes him off, or Haloti Ngata, he just shakes him off, runs around a little bit, and make something out of nothing. It's almost like what we see from Lamar Jackson. Now they're a bit of they're two different players, but the premise is the same, where you think you've done everything right. You have the quarterback, and all of a sudden it's a 20-yard gain. And it happened way too many times to the Ravens' liking, I'm sure. And just all of those moments you mentioned really brings me back down memory lane. You can talk about Rashad Mendenhall breaking his jaw during his rookie season or something on a kickoff, and Haloti with a hit on Rashad Mendenhall. All these different big hits, big plays, memorable plays that, Ben Roethlisberger, Joe Flacco, all these huge big-time players were a part of, and now we're seeing that torch really officially being passed with Flacco and Roethlisberger, this final game really being it, with Flacco being gone for a couple of years now, and Roethlisberger in his final really status seems like. And I agree. There's no way the Ravens are letting this one be, we're going to tank for a better draft pick and we're going to give up. The injuries are too much. This team still has something to fight for, and to fight for it against the Pittsburgh Steelers team that they have fought for a lot in the past with is, I think, really, really fitting at the end of the day. So, look, I'm rooting for a Ravens win, as I'm sure a lot of different people are in Baltimore at this point. And if the Ravens can hand Ben Roethlisberger a loss in his final game, I think that would be the cherry on top in this rivalry that's going to continue for many, many more years to come. But Spencer, that's all I have for you today. Thank you so much for coming on again and taking that trip down memory lane in the final segment. What's on the docket for you this week as the Ravens potentially round out their year?
Well, I'm going to be looking at this Rams loss, going to be getting ready for the Steelers game, putting out some film content at Ravens for Dummies on Twitter, BaltimoreBeatdown.com. You can find me there and be talking ball. And hopefully the Ravens are able to get gifted a miracle and just have that sweet, serene entry to the playoffs through some sort of ridiculous scenario. Crazier things have happened. Tyler Boyd has scored a 53-yard touchdown on 4th and long to punch the Bills ticket to the playoffs before. So crazier things have happened, and we'll see what ends up happening. But ultimately, it's going to be getting ready for playoffs, the Senior Bowl, free agency, draft content, all of it. I'll be here once a week with you guys talking it through and continuing to put it out. It's been a great season. We're heading into the final game of it potentially, so I'm excited to see what 2022 holds for a team that had huge aspirations but has just been limited. So hopefully we can put all of that behind us, stop talking about injuries and things of that nature. So I'm excited for that, hopefully, and I'll be right along with you for the ride for everything that goes on leading up through the draft and through next season. So thank you so much for having me on. I hope that you guys have enjoyed this season. Hopefully the Ravens are in the playoffs somehow, some way, some tiebreaker, but we'll see what happens ultimately. Thank you so much, and have a wonderful rest of your night. Thank you for hanging in with me and Kevin on Taco Tuesdays for another great season of Locked On Ravens.
Yeah, it really has been a great one. And, we'll be continuing these Taco Tuesdays regardless, whether the Ravens are in the playoffs, hopefully, or whether their season does come to an end in week 18. But thanks so much, Spencer. Be sure to check out his work. The links to his work will be in the description below as usual on YouTube. But that's all I have for you today. When we get back here tomorrow, we'll have a very special interview as well as our mailbag. So be sure to stay tuned for that, and I will see you tomorrow.